Our next speaker comes from a background of computer programming. He got into the freedom law movement way back in 1979 as a youngster. He almost got out of school. And since 1985, he's been the co-founder and for many years director of an organization which, in my opinion, is not only one of the oldest freedom organizations around, but it is the most successful freedom law group in America. You know, people come to me all the time and tell me about this wonderful website that they're on website. This guy is really good. This guy's really good. This guy's really good. Look at what they got. But you know what? They haven't heard of this group. And I know why they haven't heard of this group, because they're very modest, as you'll see by the way our next speaker, the director of it, speaks. Very modest about their successes. So modest, I've asked them to bolster it a little bit to let you know what a track record of success they have for their members by uniting together, putting our forces together. You know, you by yourself are one guy, like the ants you saw. By yourself, you're defenseless. But if you got but we all come together. Look at all the people in the room. We got over 200 people. We all get together. We have knowledge. We got power. They've done tremendous amount of success with that, which ever since I found out, I've been doing my utmost to have more people become aware of them. In fact, well, I'll tell you what. I won't take any more time. And let me bring you Mr. Steve Hempfling.
Thank you, Payman. Hello? Hello? Man, it sounds weird up here with those speakers way back there. So if I start yelling, that's why. Or maybe it's because I'm excited. We're going to talk about the IRS. Anybody heard of the IRS in here? Yeah, him, Richard. All right. We do not, in Free Enterprise Society, we really don't like the IRS very much. Some of you know that. Some of you knew, you may not realize that. So I just want to make it clear that we don't like the IRS very much. But we do like this document very much. It is the United States Constitution. Now this is the formula, if you will, that made this America the greatest country we've ever seen. When we follow this formula, but when we don't follow it, well, what happens to us? We become the greatest detonator nation in the world. But this document is very, very important, and they don't teach this in schools, by the way. So it is required that you have one of these. So if you already spent all your money at the tables, we have a whole bunch of them on the Free Enterprise Society table, the one without the banner, a couple over there. And if you don't have the money, just go over and steal one. Because these are normally like $2 or $5 or more for $1 a piece. And if you know somebody else that needs the Constitution, you ought to get some extras for them. Some of you know, if you're a member, that I'm involved with some of my own cases against Fresno County Sheriff's Department. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And we have a new program we're announcing to combat some of this New World Order stuff that's happening, which I think you'll find of interest. Talking about the Constitution here, we got an excerpt from it. It says, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land." Anybody know why this is the supreme law of the land? Because it said so right here in Article 6. We just read it. It's a trick question, huh? Steve Hempfling didn't say that. What does the supreme law mean? That means the state can override this with any legislation they want? How about the federal government? President Bush can do that, can't he? Has he done that? We've got a smart group here. Huh? And then it continues on. It says, anything in the Constitution or the laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So if California does pass a law contrary to this, it stands and the Constitution fails. Is that correct? Is that what it says? See, I'm trying to figure out. It seems to me, it says the law to the contrary would not be withstanding, so California law would fail. Is that correct? Or the United States law would fail. Why can't people in the legislature read this? That's a good answer, because it's true. We have 120 elected officials in California and who take an oath to defend this document right here. And how many of them do you think read this? You're being optimistic, sir. He said one. I don't know. When we knew a senator there real well named Don Rogers a while back, and he said at the outset, or at the best, maybe 6 have read it. That's pretty sad, because they make laws every day up there for some reason. They think they're making laws. Now at the end it says all these people, including executive and judicial officers, are bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. Is that correct? Does it say the Constitution of Russia? What Constitution did they take an oath to uphold and defend? The United States Constitution. But yet they haven't read it. Isn't that kind of strange? Of course, some of you may have done that too. If you've been in the military, you took an oath to die for the principles in this document. But yet you never probably have read it. Law enforcement officers, and particularly the ones I've run into, don't seem to understand this document. We're going to talk about income tax returns quickly. I want to cover some things. So we're going to go to the next page. All right. See, the income tax, everyone's required to file and pay income taxes, is what the IRS will tell you. That's what your family members will tell you. That's what your coworkers will tell you, or your boss, or whatever. But see, I found this little box. It's up here. I don't know if you can read it. It says, it's in the 1040 instruction booklet. So if you're filing returns, you got one of these, and you would have this little box yourself. It says, use chart A, B, and C to see if you must file an income tax return. Okay, that's good. And then there's a tip down there. It says, even if you do not otherwise have to file a return, you should file one. That's a good tip. But what I'm trying to establish here is not everyone's required. Is that a fair statement? There must be at least one. Is this just one person not required, or they wouldn't have put that box in there? Okay, that's good. We'll start with one. Now we're going back to the Constitution. We got the Fifth Amendment. There in the quotes it says there can be, oh, I'm sorry, below that. Where is it? Fifth Amendment, quote, says no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. Now there's a lot more to it, but that's important when it deals with the IRS. Because there's a case right up here above there, quoted from 1926. It says there can be no question that one who files a return under oath is a witness within the meaning of the amendment. They're talking about income tax returns in the Fifth Amendment. Now, when you file an income tax return, do you waive your Fifth Amendment? Yeah. Why is that? Because that information on the return will be used against you. Now, Sullivan also confirms this. This is not Steve Hempfling saying this. Sullivan versus United States. There's no question that you waived your Fifth Amendment right. Because some of you may not know, how do you, it says the return has to be done under oath on the last, that's all right, just leave the page, but it says it has to be done under oath. Anyone know how that is done? You file an income tax return under oath is when you sign under penalties of perjury. When any document done, not just income tax return, if you sign it under penalties of perjury, it's considered an oath just as if you put your hand on the Bible and testified against yourself, and they can use that to put you in jail. How about the Fourth Amendment? We have a part of that here. It says the right of the people to be secure in the person's houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated. Do you waive your Fourth Amendment right when you file an income tax return? Sure you do. At least to what you put on the return. Notice the word papers is in the Fourth Amendment. I emphasized it, but it was in there. What kind of papers do you think the founders are talking about? Toilet paper? Newspapers? Had to be family records, business records, photos. You had an absolute right to privacy in those records under the Fourth Amendment. So do you waive your Fourth Amendment when you file an income tax return? Of course you do. Now, the IRS has a reputation. You're innocent until proven guilty, they say, unless it's the IRS. Have you ever heard that? That's a myth. Why? Because when you file it, you file an income tax return under oath, and then they audit you, and you give them all the records to prove that you filed an invalid return, and they charge you with tax evasion. See, now you've already given them all the evidence to prosecute you. Now you have to prove yourself innocent, don't you see? But if you don't waive your rights, how are they going to do that? It makes it more difficult. The former commissioner, who was that woman? Margaret Richardson, yeah, just recently, not before she left office, was talking about this. You know, and she was talking about the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which they passed, and different things. We'll talk about her in a little bit. Well, I don't understand how. Maybe let's look at the definition of waive. If you waive a right, as the courts have said, what are you really doing? It says you abandon, throw away, renounce, repudiate, or surrender a claim, privilege, or right. In order for one to waive a right, he must do it knowingly and be possessed of the facts. Did you know you waived your rights when you filed an income tax return? Did the IRS tell you that? How about a constitutional right? You know, we talk about rights all the time, and the congressmen like to talk about rights, don't they? They have statutory rights. What are those? They're written into statute, and what can they do the next day? They can repeal that. Is that a right? Sure it is, a privilege. They have civil rights. You heard of those? Some of those are in law, but that's basically won through court decision. So one court decision might give you a right. What can the next court do? Sure can. I want to talk about the Congress has been talking about taxpayer rights too, haven't they? What's that? Beats me. I don't know either. What is a peacekeeping force? Peace by force. Peace by war. Constitutional rights is what I like to talk about. And these are rights guaranteed to the citizen by the Constitution, so guaranteed as to prevent legislative interference therewith. Can it be any more clear than that? I went to a meeting similar to this, well, smaller than this, around 1979. And the person there talked about voluntary. So we have a couple cases here. Is the income tax voluntary? It says our tax system is based upon voluntary assessment and payment, not upon distraint. That's Florida versus United States, Supreme Court case. Is that Steve Hempfling saying that? Maybe the IRS hasn't read this case. Distraint means force. Does the IRS collect with force? Of course not. How about the Franchise Tax Board here in California? We have a letter from Roger Lubins, one of my pen pals, maybe yours. He said, the Franchise Tax Board relies on its residents to voluntarily file their income tax returns. Roger Lubins, Filing Compliance Unit. Now you're probably wondering right now why we need a filing compliance unit if it's voluntary. I think that's a very good question. But as a result of going to the meeting, what I did the next day was call the IRS up and said, listen, is the income tax voluntary? And I talked to an agent there, and the agent said, yes, sir, it is. And I said, I thought for a moment, I said, well, good, I don't want to volunteer anymore. And it was a woman agent, and she said, well, sir, you have to volunteer. Well, this confused me for several days. So you have to look up the definitions. Let's look at voluntary. Proceeding from the will of one's own free choice, or voluntary system. A system of freely given support, or voluntary, unconstrained by interference, unimpelled by another's influence. Proceeding from the free and unrestrained will of the person. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is our income tax system today. 90 million Americans on April 15th, free and unrestrained, go down to the post office. Is that correct? That's ridiculous. How does the IRS collect taxes today? Love, yeah. Terrorism. Who was the original terrorist in this country? And they even coined a phrase called paper terrorist. Do they use paper to terrorize people in this country? When person gets a letter from the IRS, what do they normally do? They jump for joy, right? Some people have a heart attack right out the mailbox, and they find them later. Very intimidating. Now, we said the IRS doesn't tell you that you're waiving your rights. Let's go to the next one. Let's jump to the next. Where am I at? I want to go to the Privacy Act. That up there? Actually, this slide's a little older. I don't know if they changed it too much, but in the 1040 instruction booklet, you're going to find the disclosure. They call it disclosure. Now they changed the name of it again. Up there's Privacy Act and Paperwork Reduction Act notice. And this notice is supposed to tell you the answer to these questions that I've been asking. It's supposed to tell you what the requirements they have. So let's see what it says. Our legal right to ask for information is Internal Revenue, or the legal right for us to ask for information, why they're asking for it, how it will be used, what will happen to you if you don't receive it, and whether it's mandatory. So let's go to it's third paragraph down. I want to know what their legal right to ask for information is, don't you? It says our legal right to ask for information is Internal Revenue Code section 6001, 6011, 6012A, and the regulations. They say you must file a return or statement with us for any tax you are liable for. And your response is mandatory under these sections. Now that would lead you to believe you're required to file, wouldn't it? Does it say that you're required to file? No, it says these 3 sections require you to file. Maybe we should look at those 3 sections before we make up our mind. Conveniently, we have them on the next slide. 6001. It says every person liable for any tax imposed by this title. Let's stop right there and look at the first 3 words of that section. Every person liable. Does that make you liable for something if it starts off with every person liable? No. It cannot. Now this section would apply to you if you've been made liable already, however that is done. So it must be the next section, 6011. General rule. Oh, this was it. When required by regulations. Wait a minute, let's look at the first 2 words there. When required. Now, can this require you to do something if it starts off with when required? How about 6012? This must be it. Now, this is a little trickier. It says returns with respect to income taxes under subtitle A shall be made by the following. All right, we're getting somewhere now. Every individual having for a taxable year a gross income which equals or exceeds the exemption amount, except that a return shall not be required of an individual. Well, I didn't make it up. I'm just reading it to you. That is just the way those codes are written. And it's written in a confusing way, isn't it? Would you agree? Does that say you're required or not required? I find it interesting that every time you do find the word required, it is preceded by the word not. See, it's ridiculous, some of the things they're doing. Now, it was getting close to April 15th when I started to learn this, and after that phone call, I decided I better visit the IRS. So armed with my new knowledge, I don't necessarily recommend this. Armed with my new knowledge, I decided to go visit the IRS in San Jose Gish Road. For those that don't know, that was their big building up there at one time. I guess they had now abandoned it for something bigger. But I went in there just unannounced, without an appointment, said, listen, I've been to this meeting that said it's voluntary and I don't have to file, and it's I got to make a decision whether I'm going to file or not. Maybe you guys can help me out. I want to talk to you guys before I make a decision. And they were very accommodating. And they gave me 2 agents. And we sat in a little room, and they told me all about how great an honor it is to file and pay in this country, and blah, blah, and on and on. And then I said, well, I went to a meeting. And they said, yeah. And I started going through this very same code sections of their law. And I had a code book with me, their own IRS code book. And they were actually very surprised. They said, obviously these agents have never looked at these code sections before. And they said, I can see how you might get that idea. But the agents decided my code was wrong. So they decided they were going to get their own, and the two agents left me alone in that room there for 45 minutes approximately, which was a near eternity in the IRS building. And they came back and said, you know, we can't find our IRS code. Which would lead one to believe they only had one in that entire building, and it was lost. You would think agents trained by the government, this would be their Bible, and they would be carrying it around. But I found that that's not the case. But the agents were pretty sure that my code was wrong. And that's kind of how the meeting ended. My conclusion, I think, is obvious. To all of you here, anyway. Now, Senator Root in 1913 said it best. He said, I guess you'll have to go to jail, tax law. I shall meet you there. We shall have a merry, merry time, for all of our friends will be there. It will be an intellectual center. For no one understands the income tax law except persons who do not have sufficient intelligence to understand the questions that arise under it. What? I'm not very direct. I'm just beating around the bush here, I know. Well, I'm going to take a moment, and before we get back, we got a membership and stuff I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But I want to briefly talk about the case against the county of Fresno before I run out of time. We were at a meeting in Fresno in January of 1999. It wasn't my meeting, but I was attending the meeting, and how many was it? 25 sheriff deputies with bulletproof vests come into the meeting. And they had an arrest warrant for the people running the meeting, and they said it was an illegal pyramid, which I don't think it was, and they never proven anything against any of the people they arrested. But the problem I had there was that I was one of 40 people attending, and they detained everyone there, including myself. Well, I objected. Some of you may know this about me. And it resulted in going into federal district court with a civil rights lawsuit against Fresno County. And that was filed in July of 1999, and we're still going. However, just recently, and it's going to be in the newsletter for those that are members, and this is pretty recent, this just came in, that what the county does, the county of Fresno moved for summary judgment. You heard that term a few times, but basically summary judgment, they're asking the court to throw out the issues, all my causes of action being invalid. And the judge threw out some of them, but he couldn't throw out the unlawful detainment. So really the major issue, the most important issue we had in the lawsuit is going to trial in June against Fresno County in that case. And I think that's very good. And we're going to get a favorable jury instruction, so Fresno County is going to get a little bit of a lesson. The only problem I have is that there's 40 other people, or how many, I'm the only one that files suit. They're going to get off easy, even if I win, even though it looks like I'm going to win the suit. But I'm kind of the attitude, and this is important, I think, for a lot of you as you look at these issues. And I know it takes time, and it's maybe even frightening to go to court. But as a plaintiff against these people, it's a lot different than being a defendant. And all of you should know where your federal district courthouse is, don't you think? No, huh? Well, I just am of the attitude that you have to turn and you have to fight, and whether win, lose, or draw, we can't let them get away with these things. So I encourage some of you to, give that some ponderance if you have your rights violated. So, and we'll let you know. I don't know what the end result will be. The county may settle, or we may go to trial, but it looks very favorable at this point that Fresno County is going to have a problem with that. Now, we're going to talk about the memberships a little bit and then get into some of our cases. Free Enterprise Society has been around since 1985. I guess Payman told you that. We have a membership and membership cards and newsletters, and we have meetings. If you're not on our mailing list, it's free to sign up on the mailing list over there on our table, and we'll let you know where our meetings are going to be. We're going to have a large convention up in Sunnyvale, California in July 4th, probably. And we do some other meetings, and we also have a new traffic training program we're going to be announcing. So if you're not on our mailing list, you won't be getting information on that. Because traffic training, and we're going to actually talk about that a little bit later, but this is, the regular membership's only $45 a year, and you get the newsletter and all the benefits that go with it. Once a member, we have some optional programs. One of those is civil support services. If the IRS writes you a letter or drops by your house or whatever they like to do, we can help you respond to those letters and help you respond to those situations and do it in an appropriate manner. Our whole issue really is the Constitution, and we try to maintain that for you. Civil support actually handles more than just taxes. If you have a problem with law enforcement, it's helped people in the civil rights cases. I talked to a member today who he had an illegal arrest or a search and seizure. The county settled out of court, and I talked to one a few days ago that something similar happened. I mean, you can win, but we have to stand up. We can't guarantee winning cases, but I know one thing: if you don't file the case, you won't win. You can guarantee that. We have another program on traffic support. Now, this helps you with DMV problems. You know, Governor Wilson, some of you may remember him, pledged not to raise taxes. Well, he did not, but he did raise traffic fines, and he raised fees, and he did a lot of stuff to get more money. And he raised traffic fines like 270%. It wasn't any longer $25 tickets you might be getting. It ended up being hundreds sometimes for little minor things. But if you don't have a driver's license or you get into a roadblock, you have registration or speeding problems, and you want to fight them, don't think it was a good ticket, or it really doesn't matter, we can help you fight those tickets. Now, we can't guarantee success on that either, but we will help you fight. Now, I've actually used civil traffic support myself also, because we did get a ticket for no driver's license. And I mean, you're not in court every day. It did take a while, but we got the no driver's license ticket dismissed, so it can be done. And it's $20 per year, and then a fee per service basis. And another thing I think that throws these guys off is that, of course, when I'm with them or in court, we'll wear their suit and tie all the time, and I'll treat them with respect, even though I'm not always sure they deserve it. Even the district attorney in the driver's license case, I shook his hand and everything. They don't know what to do. Their mouth drops open. Or the deputy in the first trial, it's a few trials on that ticket. And he gets done testifying and convicting me, and I shake his hand and say, "Oh, nice to see you again." We'll see you again in federal court, something like that. And he got used to that. After a while, he expected me to shake his hand every time I saw him. So, now the other one is the Legal Defense Fund. This protects you if you're charged with failure to file. Some of you may look at this information someday, and someday decide not to file a return. I don't really push you to do one thing or the other. If you decide not to file, we specialize in that. We have this is called a Legal Defense Fund. The government does take people to court. I don't know if you've ever heard this, for a charge called failure to file income tax returns. And you might read about it in the paper around here, like this time of year, coincidentally. We have a fund that will pay for the defense. We have paralegals to assist in making the defense and doing the motions. If an attorney is needed, we'll hire the attorney. If an appeal can be taken on issues, we'll try to take that. We have been to the California Supreme Court with certain issues, and even had a writ at the Supreme Court. And we handle... I want to get into some of these cases because some of them are kind of amusing in a way. And some of the situations you get into are equally amusing. But we had one case, one of our first cases against the Franchise Tax Board was in 1987. Now, some of you may know that you're innocent until proven guilty. You ever heard that? And the prosecution has a certain burden of proof. Now, one of the things they have to prove in a failure to file income tax case is that you did not file. Would that be a fair statement? It is. And most of the time what I see in these kind of cases is someone get up on the stand and says, I didn't file and I'm proud of it. And that's okay. That's a okay answer, I guess, except that that's 90% of the prosecution's case. They'll say something like, well, if you did file, prove that you did after they charge you. Is that your responsibility? Or is it their responsibility to prove you're guilty of something? It is their responsibility to prove you're guilty of something. So, I think, for anyone in that situation, you should let them do that. Well, how do you do that? Well, you don't get on the stand and tell them you did not file. Starter, and you'll put it in writing. We had the person in San Jose didn't do this. He didn't take the stand even. And the Franchise Tax Board does some interesting things. For example, what our support group on the Legal Defense Fund found was some letters to him. One of those, I think, was the Notice of Proposed Assessment. I think that was used in the case, and their rules very clearly say that this is used to make amendments on a return already filed. Well, then why did he get one if he filed? You know? Or they'll say, maybe he mailed the return. Maybe you lost it. Can they say no, we didn't lose it? And you can go through a lot of things. Well, maybe, what do you do with it when you get the return? Oh, we type it on the computer and then shred it. Well, maybe you shred it before you put it on the computer. Would they do that? They can't say no. Well, maybe he typed it on the computer wrong. Well, that could have happened. Anyway, to make a long story short, the jury acquitted this man, and they said, we think he didn't file, we think he should have filed, but the prosecution could not prove that he did not file. And he walked. We had another case, a couple in Fresno County, California, and there was a man and wife both. Now the wife was acquitted because she didn't work and stuff. They charged her anyway through community property, and we did get her acquitted. But on his, he filed a return. It wasn't the type of return they like. It was a modified 540 income tax return asking for his money back. You've seen some of these types of forms. They still are around. But anyway, we showed by using, and some of you, if you're members, you know we use the Public Records Act or the Freedom of Information Act quite a bit, and it seems like a pain in the butt. But I'm going to tell you how important that is. Now this person who did this, they come in, when they try to show you did not file, they'll bring a computer expert in and says, well, there's no return shown on the computer. Well, through using the Public Records Act in this person's file, we saw that they considered that a valid return when he filed it. And they changed the computer like 6 months before they charged him, so they could show no return filed. And by having that information, it helped him greatly. And the trial went real well in the Grigsby case. And we're standing around there when the jury's out, and we noticed something. Because usually when they go out for jury, all the media comes in, called by the tax agency to film the guilty verdict. And we're dealing with the Franchise Tax Board. Now, Jim Raber was the Public Relations Director at that time. And we noticed something sitting there waiting for the jury, and there wasn't a media to be found. There wasn't, newspaper wasn't there, and television station wasn't there. So we felt that meant that the Franchise Tax Board was not on sure ground. So we called them. The television stations and newspapers were all there to film the acquittal of his wife, and on him, what they did, it was a hung jury, 10-2 in favor of acquittal. The Franchise Tax Board wanted to retry, and the judge says, no way. In another case in San Joaquin County, actually, the judge really liked our member, but the jury still convicted him, strangely enough, because they didn't understand what he was talking about, but the judge seemed to. And the judge, even though he was convicted, the judge says, well, I'm going to sentence you to file all income tax returns the Franchise Tax Board could show that you are required to file. And the judge, I mean, that's what the whole case was about. he would file if they showed him where it was that made him do this. What made me liable? That trial and the case took how many years, Sean? You remember? 4.5 years. Now you got to remember, failure to file is a misdemeanor, the same as not having a driver's license in California. I mean, 4.5 years on a case. The county prosecutors were livid. I mean, the county's paying the prosecution bill on a case that comes from Sacramento, and they didn't like it. In fact, I think it was a district attorney there, or I don't know who, but San Joaquin County said we would never take another tax case. And in fact, the public defender's office on the other side that's worked with us some on the case, they've recommended people to us when somebody comes to them with failure to file. They said, we don't really have time and don't really know much about this, but we know someone that does. But Jim Reaver's always there. A lot of times when I used to go to the hearings, we don't have any current cases, but I used to be there, and Jim Reaver's there on the television saying what bad guys we are and what bad guy this guy is, and putting in the newspapers and all that. And so one of our founders, George Hill, he would give them tapes on the Constitution and books on this and books on that, and Jim Reaver would give them tapes from his church back to our people saying what he says, you know, file, and you're supposed to pay your taxes and all that stuff according to his church. And Jim kind of liked us. He's the public relations director of the franchise tax board. He got to the point, kind of liked us. He said, you know, we got a philosophical agreement here. And I said, yeah. Well, yeah, Jim, but since when do you prosecute people for a philosophical disagreement? Yeah. He couldn't answer that one. And after the first acquittal there in October 1987, we caught up with him finally in Pixie, California. And I was waiting to see him again after that, because one of the things they always said, and they always did on television, he said, we never lose a case. Yeah, well, that's right, we never lose a case, he said. And we're not going to lose this one, kind of thing. Well, we won that case in San Jose in October of 87, and I don't know that any other, it's the first win against Franchise Hartsburg that I'm aware of. But anyway, I couldn't wait to see him. I caught up with Jim in Pixley, California at another hearing. I said, what do you got to say now, Jim? He says, well, you can't win them all. And that's a much better slogan for the Franchise Tax Board. In that same hearing in Pixley, California, I'm down there, one of our members is going to court that morning, and the district attorney comes out. He's the prosecutor for the state of Caldwell County, and he goes over and talks to somebody for a little bit, and then he comes over to me. I'm standing there. He says, aren't you with Free Enterprise Society? I said, yes, sir. He says, I love you guys. I read all your stuff. I hate the income tax. Well, I'm not speechless too often, but I didn't know what to say to that man. Because he was the prosecutor on our member's case coming up in about 10 minutes. But what he did in the hearing, just take himself off the case. There was an old judge up in San Joaquin County. We talked about that a little bit. One of the old judges up there says, you guys may think you're small and maybe you're not making a big impact, but he says, without you guys, the Constitution probably would have been gone long ago. And he's one of the old timers that remember the Constitution. So it's important. You may only have one case in 100 or one case in 1,000 that tries to deal with constitutional issues, but it makes a difference. We got to keep pounding them. One of the cases is proving a negative, which we're going to get into. I'm going to get into that one a little later. Not proving a negative. I forgot that's right. On the San Jose, when the prosecution could not prove that he did not file, that's, for your scientific folks out there, that's proving a negative, is the position the prosecution is in. Can they do that? Can't be done. So we got to quit giving them the evidence or testimony. Let them do their job. All right, where are we at in time? All right, let's jump to the ID for a little bit. There's a real handsome fella coming up here now. Now, Some of you may know the driver's license in California now requires a fingerprint or thumbprint, right? And then later on they put on the Social Security number, even though that was never supposed to be used for identification. And now George Bush, since nobody really likes the national ID card, they said, well, we're going to use the state driver's license as our national ID. Have you heard that? So even though your thumbprint and all that information they have on you, they said would never go to the federal computers. That's where they're going to be heading soon. They didn't pass a bill, but it's just a matter of time, probably. And in the year 2000, I was also stopped. Now, I don't personally have a California driver's license. And the officer that stopped me in 2000 didn't particularly like that. He said, don't you have a California driver's license? I said, no, sir. Do you have any idea? I said, sure. And I gave him my international driving permit. And he had a very good comment for that. He said, this is worthless. And he said, do you have anything else? I said, yes, of course. And I gave him a notarized identification called a Constitutional Place Traveler, which you'll see in our catalog. And he looked at that and he said, this is worthless. Of course, now I don't believe him. But what he wanted was government issue ID. And I took that officer to court also and did not win on the case, and we could have appealed that issue on the ID and decided not to because there's some questions we don't want the Ninth Circuit to rule on improperly for us. So we came up with a new ID card. Now I object, I guess, to the idea that you have to have ID, but I believe we can do privately issued ID, and we're gonna make it stick. Now this is Free Enterprise Society Verified Member Identification. And you're the first people to ever see this ID. This ID has actually been in works for more than a year on the details. Now the police power, we're not stepping on the police power. The police power allows the state to have certain regulatory powers. Now if you are blind, for example, they don't want you driving. You think that's good? That's probably okay. No one would really argue that one. So they have police power to make sure you're competent, and all the cases say that's what it's for. They can only deal with competency. But yet, on your driver's license, on the back of the application in California, I don't know if any of you noticed this, is that you waive your right to, that you assent to any searches they want to do on you. You're waiving rights right on the application. Number one. But it's not on the front where you're doing all the work. It's on the back, hidden. But also, even if you have the license, if you don't pay child support, or even if you're accused of not paying child support, even if you did pay it, they'll take your driver's license. They'll suspend it. Have you heard that? If you don't pay a parking ticket, they won't renew your license or your registrations on cars. Have you heard that? Now, what has that got to do with competency? Nothing. So, we address these issues in this ID card. There is a case, and we're going to talk about it on the back. There is an application, and you will have proof. We will have proof on file that you are who you say you are, and there will be a number to call. Free Enterprise Society certifies that if this information hereon is accurate and correct regarding the person whose photo is displayed, for verification, call this number. And eventually, if we get good interest in this program, we'll probably have a 24-hour computerized verification system that officers can call at 3 in the morning. Now, the purpose of this is, in the year 2000, when I got arrested for no driver's license, well, I thought it was no driver's license, but that wasn't the reason. The reason I was arrested is because I did not have satisfactory ID, and that came out in depositions against him later when I sued him. Is it spelled wrong? Well, that's good. Well, none of these are really issued yet, so. We'll send it to our proofreaders before we do that, huh?
Or let him point it out when he's trying to give you the ticket. At least that way you know he read it.
Yeah. Okay. This document complies with California law under People versus Monroe, California app, whatever, blah, 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 where it says an officer must accept this as satisfactory. Contact your city or district attorney for confirmation of this. It's very clear in California law that they should accept it, but he probably the first few people that actually have to use this with an officer, they probably won't accept it. But I was not, like I say, I wasn't arrested for not having a license. I was arrested for not having ID. And even though I might still be arrested with this card, we believe this will win when we go to court on it. They should have accepted it.
What does the state consider satisfactory?
It has to have the vital statistics and your picture on it. In fact, we're doing a lot more than that Monroe says to do. Now the layout is similar to a California driver's license in the positions of things so that the officer does not get lost. But the top of it is not licensed. It's not a replacement of a license. It's not intended to replace the driver's license or anything like that. So it is simply an ID, and this will combat not only those, if you don't have a driver's license, you may want a form of ID that doesn't get you arrested. Our goal is to keep you from being arrested. The other part of the program is, before I run out of time, we have a school to do a certificate of competency that you know how to drive. That's the other issue that gets your car taken from you. They say, well, you can't drive away from the scene because we don't know you know how to drive. We have a California certified school that will give us a certificate that says we do. And each of you can participate in that program as well. Those issues, if you get arrested or your car is taken, we're going to win on those issues, I believe. The right to travel is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. Okay, we need to go to membership because he's going to give me a 1-minute sign. So, well, we went to membership. Now, on Free Enterprise Society, it's $35. On the Legal Defense Fund, it's $850. That's the one that all the cases I talked about. What we do is we have a special today. If you join the Legal Defense Fund today, instead of $850, it's going to be $795. Now, we need the application. The applications are in the catalogs, and we have them over there on the table. But we need the application today. You can even join Free Enterprise Society. It's $45 without any money. If you want to join even the Legal Defense Fund, you can join those programs today without money. Give us a date within 30 days, the money will arrive, or on the Legal Defense Fund, you can make payments toward that. They're very, very valuable programs. If you're a non-filer, you really should consider being a member of that. If you have these other situations going on, or you want the applications for the driver or the new IDs and things, that's all available on the Free Enterprise Society table over here. But I thank you for your time, and I thank Freedom Law School for sponsoring this event and going to the trouble. See you later.
Thank you, Steve. I'll tell you about the Legal Defense Fund. It's the ultimate form of you rather mean by yourself, being picked by the IRS, California Franchise Tax Board, or some government agency, is coming together and have numbers and powers like the Founding Fathers did. And I see too much individualism in the movement where I'm just my own thing, you know? Freedom Law School works closely with Free Enterprise Society. We're distinct organizations, but we work closely because what they do is really is such a wonderful thing. Why copy them? Why not just work with them and, with the thing that they got? And I'm a member, quite frank, a member of Legal Defense Fund. So is our next speaker, Joe Bannister, we're going to be hearing about. But Joe has to catch a flight. So let's take a short break, really short one, because he has to catch a flight early. It's 4:02 my time. Be back at your seats at 4:08, 4:10, because he's going to be leaving at 5 o'clock off the podium. Okay. So be back at your at 4. Just take a quick break and come right back, and Joe Bannister is going to come back.